are live. Welcome back, everybody. Another episode of the I'm on a Mission podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Joshua Montero, and to my right, your right, I'm not sure what direction it is because we're online, but it's Corstian. Corstian's back again. We are still
Yeah.
covering the conferences. Corstian's trying to viz up the viewers right here. Just need to mention that real quick. He doesn't even have L Riz. Like it's something in between W and L Riz over here. Anyway, we are almost done with our summer division by division series. What a segue right there. Absolute connections.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's the AFC West. Corstian, I'm surprised you're not in Broncos gear, but how are you doing? You ready to talk some fun?
Yeah, I'm pretty excited. I got home from work, sat down for like a couple minutes, and then hopped on the computer to get our spreadsheet going, and then now I'm here. So, fortunately, couldn't pull out the Broncos merch in time, but it's okay. We get to talk
Yeah.
about football anyway, so it's cool stuff.
Yeah, I kind of rushed Corstian a bit. I was like, we got to get this recording done right now. So get over here. Yeah, we'll start with Corstian's favorite team in the division. They won the Super Bowl last year, back-to-back champs, and they're looking like the heavy favorites to run it back. It's the Kansas City Chiefs. Corstian, I know how much you love this team and all the Swifties that support this team. What is your floor and ceiling regarding the Chiefs?
Floor, I feel like is 12 wins. With ceiling being like 15 or something. I don't know. Like, this is a really good team. They lost a couple guys that they didn't quite replace, but like the additions are so scary, man.
Yeah, I mean, from a roster perspective, that could really happen. That could. Sorry, I am trying to get my charger together. Bad timing over here. Yeah, but no, what I was saying is I could see that happening. I wouldn't be surprised by it, but I just think the makeup of this team is going to change once again because of the additions. Like last season, they won because of their running game and their defense. And while this time they actually added good receiving personnel to supplement what they had. So I think that change is going to take some time for the rest of the offense. I have no questions about Patrick and Travis or Chris Jones. I have no questions about that. And then losing L'Jarius Sneed, that's going to be pretty significant. But I'm not going to judge the Chiefs until mid-November. So even if they start out with 3 wins and you're looking in October or something like that, they're the type of team that can pull off what Buffalo did and win like 6 to 10 straight. So I'm not sweating it. I'm not worried about the Chiefs. So while I say my floor is going to be 10 to 13, and it's probably not number 1 in the conference that I projected that I did for Cincinnati and Baltimore. I was really high on them. I think it won't matter for the Chiefs because we've just seen it in the playoffs. They can go on the road. They can win at home. It doesn't matter. You just have to be a better team than them to beat them. That's what it comes down to. So my floor is a little bit lower by 2 games, but I could totally see them just like dominate the season if they wanted to. They could even go undefeated. I'm not doubting that at all. Just take the willpower, everybody. I don't see that happening with with the challenges of a full 18-game season plus playoffs, but I'm going to stick with a lower floor and ceiling, but it doesn't impact how I view this team regular season and postseason.
Yeah. Yeah, and I just think it's like, I feel like it's, I almost want to say the defense would like take a step back, but like sure, like the Willie Gay loss is not good for the Chiefs, but it like they're able to afford that loss because you got guys like Drew Tranquil, you got guys like Nick Bolton there who are already like dominant too, and it's more like a luxury situation to have 3 really nice off-ball linebackers in your like on a defense, and so it's like Leo Chenal doesn't even necessarily need to be like super elite to be like having a positive impact on this team. And then like L'Jarius Sneed, I think everybody was kind of seeing this coming kind of early in the off season. And I think there's talks potentially about it during the course of the season. So I think Chiefs were kind of prepping themselves anyways for a situation where they don't have Sneed coming back this year too. So that's kind of what went into my like losses versus additions and like how much they'll impact the team.
Yeah, and going into their offseason moves, we had talked about Marquise Brown being the low-key signing. You're signing a lot of their guys. I think the most important thing was getting Chris Jones back. That was huge for them. And then you mentioned Tranquil. Getting him back was huge. Irv Smith was an interesting move to me. What better tight end to learn from than Travis Kelce? Still everybody's favorite darling fantasy tight end from when he was in Minnesota. And who'd have thought Carson Wentz, fresh off a MVP to be season, back, and that was a long time ago. I feel like it was like 11 years ago. I could be totally overshooting that. I think it was 2017.
I think so too. Yeah.
Yeah. War number 11. 7 years. It feels like a long time ago since Carson Wentz has been like the franchise starter for the Eagles.
Yeah.
How interesting the situation. He's backing up Patrick Mahomes. That should be a very. I don't think he's going to see much playing time, but like if the worst happens, that was an interesting signing. We'll see what happens there. But a lot of re-signing the guys they needed to, and I think the Chiefs for the most part did a good job of it. It sucks about the Snead loss, but like other than that, I think they did a good job.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's like not a like they didn't do a ton of additions through free agency, but I feel like all the guys he brought in have like a solid role to play for this team, and it was very like methodical and bringing guys where obviously they have the benefit of they're not rebuilding, so they're not needing to throw cash at everybody. That's good in hopes that a couple of them pan out, and so I think like. Like I don't know how much of an impact all of these guys will play because obviously there's only one starter from this batch of four that at least that I was able to find. But yeah, overall I thought it was a good signing session for them.
And then once again, I think the Marquise Brown signing was huge for them because they didn't have a proven receiver until like Rashee Rice showed up from the wide receiver standpoint, and now they do. Marquise Brown has always been a great talent. He just hasn't been used right. Even in Arizona, I don't feel like he was used the best, which is why like Arizona let him go. But for the Chiefs, he's a reliable receiver, which they didn't have last year. And now you just got upside around. You're accounting for the Rashee Rice suspension. That probably will be the most important signing of the year for this
team. Yeah.
Okay. Draft pick time. What were your favorite selections?
For draft picks, I think I mentioned that I thought that the Chiefs had one of the better draft classes this year. Like obviously Xavier Worthy was kind of the big hype signing, but I was a fan of Kingsley, Sua Mataya. And then I think I had Jaden Hicks as one of my top safeties on the board, and so getting him in the 4th round, I was a big fan of. Jared Wiley, I mean, I feel like it's a solid value pick where he got him, and so just for those first 4 picks, I was pretty big fans of. But obviously, Worthy, I feel like was even with the Marquise Brown signing, Worthy was like a needed, or a wide receiver in general was a needed pick for them, just because you don't know if you're going to sign Brown to a long-term deal. Rashee Rice has the question marks on his suspension going into this season at least, so it's nice just having some of that, I guess, insurance in case for a long-term situation.
Yeah, and one thing on the Worthy pick, again, Worthy was one of my favorite players coming out of the draft that people weren't talking about. Obviously, I love most of the receivers in this draft class. That's not saying much, but I think the thing with Worthy that makes him unique than like every other speedster that comes out in the draft. Obviously, he broke the 40-yard dash record, 100%. But like again, time and time again, I keep talking about his interior route running. his dig routes, his slant routes. They need refinement for sure to play on the NFL level. But right now, where he's at, that is very good compared to a Henry Ruggs, compared to like a take the top off type of defense, like Marquez Valdez-Scantling. He's going to be a better version of Marquez Valdez-Scantling, even if he doesn't have the necessary size right now. He has a skill set to develop into a one. So I really like this move for the Chiefs. I think the Chiefs know how to use this type of archetype, and the fact that he is proven to technically do more is impressive. He is not going to be the next Henry Ruggs. He is not. I'm telling you that right now. That's a bet I'm willing to die on with Xavier Worthy. I think he's gonna prove a lot of people wrong this year. He's a guy I would take in the 8th and 9th round if I'm just drafting, because the Chiefs are going to be putting themselves in scoring position and moving the ball up and down the field. He's a guy I'm willing to take a chance on around those rounds, like if I have established lineups in fantasy, for sure. So I'm really comfortable with the Xavier Worthy pick. I think the other guy on the other side of the ball that could be a really good player, given that the Chiefs know how to develop cornerbacks well, is Kamal Haddon. That's a guy who has the necessary size the Chiefs are looking for. He's like 6'1", 200 pounds. He's a guy they need to have after losing L'Jarius Sneed. I'm not saying he's going to be a starter because they have 3 entrenched starters right away, but if you're just looking at Jalen Watson's development pattern and Joshua Williams' development pattern and how they showed up against the Bengals in that championship game 2 years ago, I think we could see similar things from Kamal Haddon. So this is a good draft choice by the Chiefs to stay ahead of like their losses here.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Before we get to the coaching staff, who's your second-year breakout player you're seeing on this list?
Yeah, I think for me, my second-year breakout would be Wayne Morris. More so out of necessity for this team. Obviously, you had like Donovan Smith. He was their left tackle last season. He wasn't as great as I think the Chiefs hoped. Obviously, now you got a guy here in his second year taking on this starting role, and with a year under his belt, you want him to perform at least halfway decent. Obviously, Chiefs have just elite talent across the board typically on this offensive line, so he won't necessarily. He'll have help in terms of development and kind of getting good, but I think I have him as my second-year breakout player.
Yeah, it's tough to find a good one on this list. I probably would have put Rashee Rice if he wasn't dealing with the suspension. It's probably coming soon. But Shamari Connor will be my selection. Sort of like another necessity pick, but I think another year in this Chiefs system, he's going to feel more confident. I think he'll get a little bit more opportunities and dime packages and when people go down in the secondary because they're seeing more snaps than what they're used to. I think he'll have opportunities to shine, and he might be the best option out of these that I'm looking for. So that would be my guy. Who's your X factor on this team?
My X factor I had is Marquise Brown. I think if this team is going to explode on offense, that connection between Mahomes and Marquise Brown really needs to connect quick. So obviously, Travis Kelce, until he doesn't show he's good, but obviously he is he's an older player in the league. He has been the focal point of this offense for quite a while too. And so having someone to kind of alleviate some of the pressure on him in terms of having to perform for this offense, I think Marquise Brown's going to have to be kind of an X factor for this team.
I think for me, it was hard to find out because you have a lot pretty much. Like Patrick Mahomes is kind of the answer here. But I'm going to say Juwan Taylor. We all know how many penalties he had towards like the first half of the season. I feel like refs got tired of penalizing him. That's how much he got penalized for incorrect stance and like just refusing to change it. Got benched so many times. Has he shown improvement in that area? He's the one guy that can hold this offense back, a la Trevor Penning. So you do not want to see that if you're the Chiefs. So the sky's the limit with him. And I think it's even more of a necessity for the Chiefs team because they have so many young guys they would have to rely upon if Juwan Taylor doesn't fix this habit of his. So he's the X factor for me because, yeah, sure, Patrick Mahomes can complete a 3rd and 20, but would you want him doing that like 3 times on the same drive because you couldn't get your fundamentals right? I think not. So while it's not a huge barrier to overcome, this might be the most important thing to keep in mind with the Chiefs, which is why he's my X factor. Alrighty. Just loading the coaching staffs here. Andy Reid, not much has changed. One thing I didn't realize is I think he has more wins as a Kansas City Chiefs coach than he does as a Philadelphia Eagles coach during his tenure. That stat was
crazy.
pretty wild to me because I feel like he just joined Kansas City, but it's been like 8 years since he's been involved with the program. Like, people know him as like the Philadelphia Eagles head coach. No, he's been in the program for 11 years. So like, it's 284 total wins, 3 times Super Bowl winner. I think it was just 5 years ago where people were like, is Andy Reid going to be in the Hall of Fame of coaches because he has such great seasons, but he never has a Super Bowl victory? I mean, he's looking pretty good right now. So that part of the team is not changing. Somehow they won a Super Bowl with Matt Nagy as offensive coordinator. I think that doesn't show how good the Chiefs are. I don't know what will. And Steve Spagnuolo, probably the best defensive coordinator in the postseason you ever have to face. He should be in the Hall of Fame as an assistant coach if that was a thing. Because you think about what he did to Tom Brady, you think twice really, and you think about what he's done with his defense, what he's done in this like previous playoffs. It's been nothing short of remarkable. I think his ability to adapt to like losing players and keeping players, like growing and developing in the scheme. I was shocked he didn't get a head coaching job. Like, I know he's been head coach for the Giants, but like, this is a guy that I think has proven himself time and time again. And unless he retires, I don't see the Chiefs defense falling off.
Yeah, it's a nice coaching staff besides Nagy, I guess. I don't know. I feel like Nagy's, I don't know. It's just like he had one good season in Chicago, and then it was all just kind of downhill. I think there's other elements.
He's a great play designer. Let's not get at designing plays. He's brilliant. He's absolutely brilliant. And I think you saw this in his first season at Chicago. But I think the difference between him and Reid clearly is like when to call the plays, because being a play caller is different than being a play designer. You could design all these complex plays in the world, but if the defense knows it's coming all the time, what's stopping them from dropping 8? I think Andy Reid has found a great balance between when to throw a wrinkle, when to run, when to be disciplined, when to be strategic, and when to just be tough. And I think he's found all these flavors and ways. So like Matt Nagy as an offensive coordinator, in all seriousness, that might be his calling card instead of being a leader man and then trying to, because again, he's a great leader, vocal leader, rah guy. But when the going gets tough and the criticism falls his way and he has to make adjustments to his play calls, that's where I think it gets tough for him. So being behind Andy Reid, who can bear the brunt of that, I think is the best situation for him. Yeah, already. So second in division, despite having the same record as the Broncos, is the Las Vegas Raiders. Promising season. Had a very impressive game against the Chiefs where they scored 2 defensive touchdowns back to back. Lots of changes within this team. They're still recovering from the John Gruden tenure. Derek Carr's first season without him. And props to Antonio Pierce for guiding this team to an 8-win season. It is very impressive. Corstian, when you look at their schedule, how do you think they're going to fare this season as far as like win-loss for ceiling?
Yeah. I feel like as a floor, it could be like a 5-win season. Just with I'm looking at the roster too. And I'm just like thinking of like the potential struggles this team might have. But then on the flip side, I do think that their ceiling could be around 10 wins. It's a pretty wide gap for me. And I think this is just due to some of like their superstar players. I think are some of the best in the league at what they do, and like they have the ability to elevate those around them. But I also do have a lot of question marks around other parts of the teams. I think quarterback's a noticeable spot with that, where it's like I think they'll service fine, but they won't like blow you out of the water in terms of quarterback play. And then I feel I have question marks around Zamir White, starting a whole season, but then I feel like Jacoby Myers played well last season. Devontae Adams is Devontae Adams. Max Crosby's him. Christian Wilkins was like one of the hot, free agency signings, and so it's a wider range for me. But I just feel like this team, I think more than a lot of other teams, have a lot of question marks that could go really good in their direction, or could just end up flopping really hard on their face.
Yeah, I don't blame you for that prediction at all. I think for a team like this, where there's a lot of unanswered questions, that's a good range to have. I'm probably going to peg them at like 7 to 10 wins. And the reason I say that is I could see them do really well in two stretches of their season when you have the Panthers week 3 all the way up to the Rams of week 7. If they could end up with a 4-1 record after that, I think the prospects of their season look really good. And then another stretch is week 14 through 17. They had the Bucks, Falcons, Jaguars, and Saints. Between those 8 games, if they're able to end up with a winning record through those, I feel a lot more comfortable about this team approaching double digits on the season. So the key thing is, how do they do in those two stretches of the season? Because I think the other games on their schedule, there are like mismatches as far as like talent level still that they have to address. So I'm gonna say a 6 to 10 win, floor to ceiling range is where I would go with this team.
Yeah, we're on that similar wavelength.
Sorry, I meant 7 to 10.
Never mind, we're not on that similar wavelength anymore. I'm
close. We're close. Again,
Close
two games off. But when you look at free agency, you mentioned it. Christian Wilkins is probably one of the best signings they've had, just from a standpoint of like Max Crosby was still like coming off of a Pro Bowl season despite all the changes that happened around him. Really impressive, really. And then Wilkins himself is coming off of 9 sacks. They're hoping to get some things from Tyree Wilson and Malcolm Kuntz, but that defensive line is looking really, really scary. So that is one thing that's impressive. Gardner Minshew still slinging it with a different team. They signed Alexander Madison, interesting signing. And then that was pretty much it. Besides like retooling their offensive and defensive line. So, what did you make of their free agency?
Yeah, I feel like they're playing their cards close to themselves as well. Where I think, obviously there's the big ticket signing, Christian Wilkins, but then the rest of the signings are like hesitant in a good way, where you're not like overly committing to a lot of big names that you're going to be pushing for a Super Bowl run this season, because there's a universe where Aiden O'Connell, he balls out, and then you rely on the Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers, and Brock Bowers kind of combination to roll out with your offense, and that's kind of your deal. But then there's also the situation where Aiden O'Connell has just kind of another meh season where you're looking to draft a quarterback pretty high, and so by not spending all this money on these huge contracts with a bunch of different players, it kind of lets you prepare to build a team in a way that you envision your quarterback might be well surrounded by in an upcoming draft.
Yeah, I think from the defensive side, they're well planted at this point. They're trying to win with their defense in their running game. So I think that's where you're headed. And I think if they kept Renfro, I would be a little bit more excited about this team. But I think with their draft additions and like the development from their other guys, I think they're in a good spot because they did surround Aiden O'Connell with the tools, and now it's just like, is he the guy? This is kind of the year to decide that. And if not, we're just going to draft a guy next year with a really, really good surrounding cast. Now, the key thing is, will Devontae Adams be there for so long to oversee that, or will be like, I'm out of here. I don't want to be here. I doubt it, given his trust in Antonio Pierce. But you never know. So, yeah, I thought the free agency was good to like build on the supporting cast they've had. Moving on to the draft, like, I mean, talk about taking best player available. Brock Bowers. I love this move for them. I get it. They have Michael Mayer, but I think it was just leaning into just taking the better player. They did that with JPJ as well out of Oregon. A lot of these guys that you see on their list, they're physical, they're like tall, they're lengthy. Even the back half, like their Air Force guy, Trey Taylor, and then Devonshire. They might not be the most talented guys, but they're physical. They're gonna make plays on the ball. So I like even the Ohio State kid, Eichenberg. So I think they made a lot of moves to get like the gritty and the grimy players that really make the Las Vegas Raiders Las Vegas Raiders.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like my favorite pick of theirs was Jackson Powers Johnson. He was a guy I think that we both thought might have gone to the Steelers at 20.
He should have.
Yeah, and so getting him at 44 in the second round, I think, is a nice steal for him. Obviously, it seems like they're not going to be playing him at center this season and putting him at right guard, at least for what we know right now. And then I feel like, I mean, you can't go wrong with drafting Brock Bowers, but part of me feels like it might have been like a panic pick of like, because I know the Broncos picked right ahead of them. They got Bo Nix, and I think a lot of people thought that the Raiders may have had Bo Nix on their board. And so I think because, the quarterbacks that they wanted weren't there anymore, they got Brock Bowers. I think, I don't know. I'm like, overall, like, again, like I said, you can't go wrong with Brock Bowers. The Chiefs could have drafted Brock Bowers at like traded up, got him, and I don't think I would have been too mad at that either, even though they got Travis Kelce right ahead of him. And so, yeah, that's kind of just my thoughts on it. I don't know too much about the rest of their class, but I know obviously everyone was high on Bowers, and then I was pretty high on Jackson Powers Johnson.
Yeah, I mean, the one guy to know too is Richardson out of Mississippi State. He ran his 44.34 seconds. And now, that's not everything, but that tells you what he can do in the return game. And, he had 7 pass breakups for the team. And then he also had 164 tackles in a college season. That's a lot. That's a lot in the college season. So what it tells me is he's not afraid to get involved with the run game. That's going to be really big value. He's probably going to have to develop a lot on pass defense to like how to use his speed to like cut off routes and turn that into quickness. But that's a guy that like he's flashy to me, and he's the type of corner you want. You don't want your corner to be a weakness in the run game. So that'll probably be one guy I point out here. Okay, coaching staff. Or actually, before I do that, I think the obvious second-year breakout player. Actually, there's a couple. So I'll let you say who your guy is for second-year breakout.
Yeah. I think there's 2 that a lot of people can talk about. Obviously, one's Aiden O'Connell. I won't go that route necessarily. I think they have like a safety blanket behind him with Gardner Minshew, and so it's like even if he bums out, you have to back up. And so I'm gonna go with Tyree Wilson here. He was their top draft pick last season, and obviously he's behind a couple of guys here right now on the depth chart, and so obviously you want a guy like him to play up to his draft pedigree and ball out, and so that's what I'm gonna have as my second-year breakout.
I thought for a second that Zamir White wasn't his second year for a second, but then I remembered he was drafted in 2022. So that's on me. I'm gonna say Aiden O'Connell because I think he has the surrounding cast to make improvements. Now, Am I expecting him to crack the top 10 or top 12? No, probably not. But like if he hits top 15 to like 18, that might be enough to move the team into the playoffs because they did finish with 8 wins last season among like everything. So I think he's a smart player. He's a smart player from Purdue. He has the mental game. So like I think that's going to go a long way to helping him succeed. Now the thing is, can he mix the athletic traits? He's kind of on the opposite end of quarterbacks, where you see like quarterbacks with these amazing athletic gifts, but don't know how to use them strategically or mentally. So O'Connell's like a little bit physically limited, but can he overcome that? If he can, in the college, in the NFL game, I think he's going to second year breakout. I'll go reverse order for X Factor here. I think it has to be Christian Wilkins, like because if he falls off, there's no point in signing him. Because now you're just trusting Max Crosby to do everything by himself. So like he's the guy that's like if he can beat one-on-one blockers, I think it'll unlock everything for the scary defensive line.
Yeah. Yeah, with my X factor, I was torn between Christian Wilkins and another player, that being Max Crosby. So I'm gonna go with Max Crosby here. I feel like it's that duo that that the Raiders here are just gonna be heavily reliant on, especially on the face of their team. Being kind of just like a mean, tough defense with Crosby, already, and so just him continuing that, kind of him building off of what Christian Wilkins has to offer, I think, can really boost his game further than what we've already seen before, which is, already, I think, defensive player of the year caliber. I think last year, I feel like it really could have gone any way the past couple seasons. With Max Crosby, I think he is one of the best pass rushers in the league right now. And so I think Christian Wilkins can elevate his game, and he can elevate Christian Wilkins' game.
Yeah. Both not bad selections there. One last thing on the coaching staff before we get to your beloved team. Antonio Pierce, I think he's a culture builder. I think he's going to continue leading his team in the right direction. Marvin Lewis, assistant head coach, 27 years in the league. He's still kicking around, so that's cool to see. This is the first time I've seen a game management coach, Matt Sheldon. He's pretty experienced, 20 years in the league. The one thing that surprised me, Luke Getsy. I don't know what to make of the situation because I think his performance with the Raiders is going to go a long way to saying what happened with the Bears. It seems like he was pretty innovative and would eventually get Justin Fields to he would eventually mold the scheme to play what Justin Fields wanted. But the thing with him is he took too long, and sometimes he got very horizontal to a fault where defenses weren't scared of that at all. Is part of it the personnel? Maybe he's got better personnel with the wide receivers than he did with the Bears before DJ Moore hopped along. So that's one thing. He's got better tight ends than what the Bears had, or what the Packers had. So I think there's some credit to. It might have not have been all on him. So I'm very curious to see how he does. His development and helping Aiden O'Connell will go a long way to see what the ceiling of this team is for me.
Yeah. And then on top of that too, it might just be the style of quarterback is what was kind of the issue, where it's he might just be better at scheming just pure pocket passers. And so that's where we might see the improvement, I guess. Whereas I think Justin Fields, he showed at Ohio that he can pass. He was good at passing the ball.
Yep.
But yeah, I just say at Ohio because that's the state that he was. Whatever. But obviously,
it's Georgia, man.
But even still, Justin Fields' strength did come, or an added bonus was his running ability, which I don't think Getsy was fully embracing to the extent that it should have been done. Even though he had ridiculous amounts of rush yards, but it wasn't schemed as well as I think it could have been.
Yeah, and then part of it was the processing? Was he giving Justin Fields too much of info on like where to look for passing game, or was it more Justin Fields not getting to other reads quicker? So like
Mhm.
that's a thing where you have to see, oh, is it just a player to player kind of thing? Can he adapt to his player? I think he can adapt to Justin Fields well. Like as you get to the second half of the season, if you notice, their offense has got a lot better in the second half of the season. But um, yeah, it's an open question, and we'll see what happens. Patrick Graham still kicking it. They tend to play the most straight up defense you'll see in the league. Um, the Raiders. So like I'm wondering if he's going to do the same thing now that he has Christian Wilkins and Max Crosby, or if he's going to run games so defenses can't like shift an entire side of those two. So that'd be interesting. All right, enough talking. Let's go to a team that I believe is in Denver. They call it the Broncos or something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah. Corstian, did you know the opponent in week 2 that's on the Broncos schedule right now?
Oh yeah, the Pittsburgh Steelers.
And you know who the quarterback is for the Pittsburgh Steelers right now?
I know who their kick returner is, Justin Fields.
Who's their quarterback?
I think it's some guy named Russell or something.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So I remember some guy who always said like Broncos country, let's ride at the end of every like press conference or something like that.
Mhm.
So much to the fact that your boy over here kept saying Broncos country, let's ride to a record like 7 times on this same podcast over
Mhm.
here. It's the Denver Broncos. Of course, I'm not even gonna bother asking you what their floor and ceiling is because you're just gonna tell me it's 17 and 17 for both of them. So looking at their schedule, they're going they got a pretty good schedule the first 3 weeks. Not gonna lie, they can go 3-0. Now I'm not saying they're gonna go 17-0 because you look at weeks 9 and 10. That's rough. But and the last 2 games are kind of rough in my opinion too. But I'm thinking I'm a little bit more optimistic on the Broncos, even with a Bo Nix. I'm gonna go and say their floor is 8 wins, just like it was last season, and their ceiling is gonna be 11 wins. And that 11 wins is very, very generous of me, but that's what I got from the Broncos.
Yeah, no, I think that's a decent assessment. I think, like, obviously Broncos go 17-0 right now, but I think they're a potential like 6 to maybe 9 win team this season. I think like that first half of the season, maybe they could finish around 500-ish. I know they got a couple like tricky games in there, but I think that
they go 6-2 to be honest. I wouldn't blink.
Yeah, so I think they have like a strong first half of the season, which would really set the tone of how the rest of the year will go. Because, like you said, weeks 9 and 10, Ravens Chiefs will be tough. We're going to be assuming the Falcons will be a stronger team. Maybe they'll be the Jaguars of the season, and everybody thinks they'll be the unstoppable juggernaut, but they suck. I don't know. But anyways, Falcons will be tough. Browns are in there. Colts will be a tricky game. Bengals are at the back end, and then they finish off the season against the Chiefs. So it's a scary second half of the season for them. But
their last 4 games after the bye, especially, that's rough. That's a rough way to end the season.
Yeah. And so it's like you hope you can, like the Broncos, you hope you finish maybe 6-2 at week 8, and then maybe you beat like
survive.
You'll likely lose Ravens, Chiefs, Falcons. That gets you at about 6-5. Maybe you split with Raiders and Bengals there. That gets you 7-6, and then I don't know. And then it's kind of like maybe you can beat the Colts, maybe you can beat the Chargers. Just historically, you have done well, but like it's a tough season.
Yeah. That's my floor of 8. So, yeah, I mean, to be honest, it all depends on how well Bo Nix and Sean Payton get along. I think that's going to really determine the ceiling of this team.
Yeah.
But going into free agency, sans like cutting Russell Wilson for whatever reason with that contract and whatnot, what did you make of their moves? There weren't really any that stood out besides there's a lot of like Denver Saints like action here because you got like Adam Troutman, Malcolm Roach, like Michael Burden, like a lot of Will Lutz, like coming back, like a lot of Saints and LaJordan Humphrey. How could I forget him? Like, there's great name. But like a lot of former Saints are coming to Denver. But how do you assess free agency for them?
Yeah, I think they did a good job with just kind of like the tricky cap situation that they were in. Obviously, I know they did like restructuring deals with a couple players to kind of open up some more room to sign guys. I was a fan of Brandon Jones. He's a bit younger, and he had a really strong end of the season last year. He's noticeably cheaper than what it would cost to keep Justin Simmons. Obviously, I would have loved to have Justin Simmons back, but I think he's a potentially really good replacement for that. Caden Stearns and PJ Locke is kind of the other safety combo you got there, where Caden Stearns has kind of had a history of being hurt, so it's kind of like I like the safety duo you got there. I heard from Commanders fans that Cody Barton kind of sucks, so it's kind of a big wait and see from that. I did like John Franklin Meyer though from the Jets. I know a lot of Jets fans are kind of sad to see him go. I think he's an upgrade from Jonathan Harris, who they let go in the offseason. And so I think that their defensive line has gotten like a little bit better here. Josh Reynolds, I think, was an underrated signing where you're not going to see him as like a 1,300-yard kind of guy, but I think he fits well in this offense. And obviously the GOAT, Zach Wilson, the mom slayer or whatever. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Jarrett Stidham is entrenched as a starter, but that could easily change. Who knows what's going to happen this season? Zach Wilson could probably be playing for the Denver Broncos, and I don't think I would have put that on my calling card. I forgot to switch the headings, by the way. My bad, audience. We are talking about the Broncos still, so my bad. We are long past the Raiders. Yeah, I mean, not a lot to talk about free agency wise. They lost a lot in the one loss column with Russell, with Justin Simmons. I mean, it's going to be a challenging year, like trying to replicate that production because Russell Wilson had a really good season for them last year. But I think when you're moving on to a future like Bo Nix, I think it's a much needed move. I want to pivot to the draft because obviously the Bo Nix sign is the one headliner of this draft class. I think he's one of the more underrated quarterbacks. I don't think he should have gone this late. I also thought Michael Penix should have been drafted with the 3rd overall pick as well. So, I mean, I liked a lot of these quarterbacks out of this class. I actually think he might be a better fit for what Sean Payton wants than what Russell Wilson was. So I think he's the guy that's going to be the clear X factor for how the ceiling goes for me. Just a quick spoiler alert on that. And I think sitting him down like for a few games behind George Stidham is going to be good. But he might be the type of guy where at 25, like all he just needs is as many reps as possible so he can play as soon as possible. So he's the guy that stood out to me. The other guy that wasn't really like taken close in like day one, but a day 3 guy I really liked was Audric Estime. I think he's a guy that's going to take a little bit off of Javonte Williams' plate and still give that power presence that the team needs. Obviously, they were heavily relying on Javonte, and then when he went down, kind of sucked. But I think he's a guy that can replicate what Javonte does a little bit, so you not have to use him as much.
Yeah.
And he has some different type potential too. So I really like that signing for what they did from a football scheming standpoint. I'm not saying he's a sleeper you should draft in fantasy in the 10th round. Obviously not. But like he's a guy that's going to give the team value that they didn't have last season.
Yeah. I'm obviously as a Broncos fan, I pay attention more to some of these guys in the draft, and so like I'm probably a little too high on some of these guys too. But yeah, I like your that running back Audric Estime, and then I know he's been making kind of like some news within like the Broncos like news channels, I guess, that I follow somewhat. But then I feel like another underrated guy was Jonah Ellis. He was their second pick that they took, and he was the third rounder. But I think he just kind of adds some more depth to that edge position for this team, where it's a lot of guys that definitely improved. They showed a lot of improvement last year, but there's still definitely room to go. I think the Broncos are still looking for someone to break out to be kind of like the superstar consistent double-digit sack guy.
That might be Jonathan Cooper. I'm really high on Jonathan Cooper for them. I think he could potentially be that guy.
Yeah, and I think I was pretty happy with Nick Bonito's development last season too. He led the team with 8 sacks last year, so he could be a potential there. But I know Jonah Ellis, he can be a solid pass rusher, but then I know he allegedly is pretty decent at the run stop too, and so that's something that I was pretty excited about hearing about Jonah Ellis. Oh yeah, and obviously Bo Nix, I'm excited for him. Hopefully, I'm like a lot of people think that, like, from what I've seen in comments, is like, oh, like he's gonna get crushed by the old line or whatever. But like PFF ranked the Broncos offensive line as one of the best in the league. Russell Wilson had some of the most time in the league to throw the football, regardless of like the sack count, And so I think Bo Nix, if he is thrown into the starting role pretty quick, I think he'll have decent time to at least be able to process, and so it's going to be a lot of learning how to process the field, especially when you have a decent offensive line that can kind of create solid pockets for you.
And then you didn't mention Troy Flinken, did you?
I did not. No, I did not.
Yeah, I think him being from the same college and drafted in the same draft class, I think that'll help a long way. I don't think it's going to be like a Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow type connection. But I do think it's going to help like build the chemistry with the whole roster. So I think there's a much needed move they need to make to strengthen the depth chart of that wide receiver group, including what they did in free agency and then with Tim Patrick coming back. So I really liked what they did in the draft. The majority of the picks are ahead on them. But who is your second year breakout play? I feel like there's an obvious one here, but just want your take.
Yeah. I feel like an obvious one would be like Marvin Mims. Oh man, I'm going down. There we go.
I think it's a precursor to the Broncos season this year.
Sliding away, but I guess there's 2 guys that I would like to see have a breakout. One being Alex Forsyth, the center. He was the center at Oregon with Bo Nix, and so I think that if he kind of shows out during camp and preseason, there's a solid chance that we get this nice center to quarterback connection that I think would be just nice for development's sake. But then even more so, I think Riley Moss needs a second-year breakout. Obviously Pat Surtain is really good. But then last season, I think the Broncos thought they had a guy with Damari Mathis who ended up struggling quite a bit. And so they were kind of figuring out what they got. They got Levi Wallace now. And so he's kind of a guy that they're hoping can at least hold down the fort for a little bit. But obviously Riley Moss was taken in the 3rd round last season. And you're going to want to see him step up and not just be a pure special teams guy. So I'm going to have, I guess, Riley Moss is my not so obvious second year breakout.
Yeah, I mean, with Levi Wallace, I think I personally like him as cornerback. I think he was really good in Buffalo. So I think there's a chance that Riley Moss won't need to see the field as much because Levi Wallace is killing it. Since you mentioned Marvin Williams, I'll go with a different guy. I think it's Julian McLaughlin. He was like a sleeper pick for me last year. He reminded me a lot about like Darren Sproles, but he could do a lot like of interior running as well. I could see him lead the team in catches and yards from the running back perspective. In that entire room, he's that kind of guy. He's their screen guy, and I think he just brings a different dynamic than what you get out of P. Ryan Williams or the new pick Estime. So like, he's a guy I'm looking to see to break out in the passing game because he's gonna offer a different dimension for Bo Nix, be a check down option. I think he's going to be relied heavily, and he's a sleeper pick that you might not think about in fantasy drafts. If you're just looking for a PPR fiend, he might be that guy for the Broncos. And you could see the Broncos being like pass-heavy splits where he's going to be utilized a lot. So he's a breakout pick for me. We'll go in reverse order here. X Factor, I think it has to be Bo Nix here. He's the engine that's going to drive the bus for how this team performs this season. Even though not expecting them to hit the playoffs, I think he's their future. And like seeing like where they're at after the season will largely ride on like what was Bo Nix's production when he was on the field.
Yeah.
Sideways.
Oh dang. Let me. Boop, boop. Okay. For me, I'll be in like a hypothetical world where maybe like Bo Nix starts only half the season and it's kind of just a developmental year for him. So I'm gonna have Marvin Mims as my X factor. Last season, he didn't necessarily get as much wide receiver play, and from like the coaching reports, it seems like they had him slotted for a very similar role to Jerry Jeudy, and so it was like they had him kind of just sit back because they had Jerry Jeudy there at the time. And so he has, now it seems like he's going to have the full opportunity to be kind of an outside guy doing his thing. Because in the limited time that we did see him, he did make a lot of, really cool, big, flashy plays. But it was just like here and there we'd see it. And so if he can kind of do that on a more consistent basis, that'll be huge for whichever quarterback's starting this year. And it'll be huge for just the development of Bo Nix for however much he plays this year too.
Yeah, I hear you. I think from a coaching staff perspective, they might actually looking at this, they have a lot of great guys for coaching staff. Because we've dogged on Vance Joseph. Everybody in the league wanted him gone after like a 50-point loss. But you look at what they have, like from senior assistants to like offensive coordinators. Like they have a lot of experience. Like Pete Carmichael's been the Saints offensive coordinator for like 20 straight years. I feel like Joe Lombardi, a lot of experience as a play caller. Like in special teams, like they have like a combined 48 years of experience here. So like I think I actually like this coaching staff a lot. But a lot of pressure's on them to see like what's it them or what's it Russ. Because if this season flops and they can't develop Bo Nix, I think the Broncos have bigger problems than like trying to deal with the Russell Wilson contract post him being on the team.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say I'd still have like my skepticisms on Vance Joseph. And it's like the defense had that really incredible run, like mid to end ish of the season, but then we kind of saw them taper back to reality the last like 2-3 games of the season, and that's feeling like it might be the norm for the team. And so if it's kind of like I don't necessarily expect another 70 points let up by this defense, but if it's kind of like what we saw in those last 3 games, I don't know what the longevity of Vance Joseph as defensive coordinator for the team, but who knows? Maybe he's able to get more turnovers consistently throughout a season, but yep.
We shall see. Okay. Alrighty. Last division here. I think this is a fun team personally, no matter where they're going to finish up next season. Los Angeles Chargers, not a great year last year. A lot of high expectations. I thought they were winning the division. They end up winning 5 games total. Brandon Staley out. J.C. Jackson out. Like a lot of changes on this team. Keenan Allen out. Mike Williams out. Gerald Everett not there. Austin Eckler not there. They completely revamped their skill position groups. Knowing that, Corstian, what's your floor and ceiling for the Chargers?
I feel like my floor for this team, I'd say like 9 wins, and then my ceiling I'd have at like 12 maybe. And that's just because I'm a believer in the head coach now. I feel like that's just going to be a huge thing for this team. Like maybe I could knock it down like a few wins just with my question marks around the the receiving room, but I think they attempted to address it quite a bit over the course of the offseason, despite, losing their two main guys. And then I do think that they're a team that could win off of their defense with just a lot of the key playmakers that I like there. And then I do think they have a pretty strong offensive line that can just hold things up, at least for now.
One thing I did not expect to see was J.K. Dobbins on this episode. I've been completely asleep on the wheel, despite taking a heavy interest in the Chargers this offseason. That I didn't know J.K. Dobbins was on the team. That aside, I think their strength of schedule is favorable enough where I think we could see them go back to an 8-11 win season, similar to the Broncos. Because you look at the first 3 games, they're all winnable. Then after the bye, they have winnable games for the next 5 games over here. So if they're sitting with 6 wins by week 10, that is really good by Chargers standpoint. And they're finishing off the season pretty strong as well. In 4 games, they have stretches where they can push towards 11, 12 win seasons. So even with a new coaching staff and then so much a change on the skill position players, that's where I see them 11 to 8-11 wins.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair assessment. Like I said, there's a couple question marks, and there's just things you always wonder with kind of these bigger changes. But overall, I think I think we both think that it's going to be a positive trend compared to last season, at least.
Yeah, 100%. Any observations from free agency?
Yeah, I think obviously the running back room is a whole revamped thing. I think they were ready to move on from Austin Eckler. Obviously, I think Eckler still played decently well, but you got a guy who can be more of a bell cow in Gus Edwards. J.K. Dobbins, we'll see what happens with him with everything. But then I know you like Kamani Vidal, and so I think that's kind of a fun bit. But then also I liked Puna Ford. Nothing crazy. It's just the normal, interior defensive end that can help boost Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack's play.
Yeah, I mean, obviously a lot of re-signings, but I like the Christian Fulton signing. He was he's one of those underrated cornerbacks you don't think about, but he's just steady, high draft capital when he was on the tight ends. Steady player. He's not going to be flashy. He's not going to get you all the picks and stuff, but he can play in the scheme. And I like this selection a lot. I think he was one of my other favorite signings of note. And then Caden Hurst and Will Dissly, they're not guys that scream oh, game changing tight end. But they're receiving threats when they had the ball. And I think with a guy like Justin Herbert, he can maximize Will Dissly and Hayden Hurst in the seams. Justin Herbert can fit balls through the seams. So I think those are key signings just from a depth perspective at tight end. I like those a lot.
Yeah, it was a fun just off season in general for them. This was the point of making the spreadsheet where I was like, man, this is a fun division to look at, because I was looking at all the moves they made, and I'm like, they had a fun off season, I think.
And then look at their draft. That wasn't the best part. Took a mammoth guy in Joe Alt. They probably have two of the best athletic freaks on bookend tackles there with Slayton and Alt, and then Zion Johnson, Bradley Bozeman, solid guys there. Completely changed this offensive line. Then you tackle that on with one of my guys. Well, they got 2 of my guys really. When you think about not Easton Stick, I'm looking at the wrong page. I'm just reading it. Yeah, Easton Stick. He's gonna be Super Bowl MVP next year. Book it. But Ladd McConkey, this is a guy that could lead the team in receiving this year. Because you think about where he's used, and you think about like where Justin Herbert likes to target, where Lam McConkey can function, but he's an outside receiver. Like he could be the Keenan Allen on this team. Day one.
Sure.
Day one. Like he is a guy I'm really high on, especially. And then obviously you talked about Kamani Vidal, Junior Colson. Like they had a very good draft class. And like even got a guy, I think he was the son of some really good receiver. Someone called like Jerry Rice or something like that. He played for the 49ers for a couple of years. So they got that kid. A lot of fun picks, a lot of great picks. They're probably one of the favorite draft picks out of this division for me, to be honest.
Yeah, like it was a solid class for them. Even like Cam Hart, the cornerback they drafted, I think we had him going as kind of like a second. At least I envisioned him going as like a second, maybe third round guy to get him in the 5th. So I think that's a potential like high ceiling, lower floor type player. Joe Alt, I think, was a really solid pick. Was an instant starting player that we pretty much feel like is going to be a superstar from the get-go. Junior Colson, one of the better off-ball linebackers in this class. Lam McConkey, everybody knows Lam McConkey now. We'll see how Brendan Rice plays. Like in college, he really wasn't that good. Very much was drafted in the 7th because of his dad. The name attached to it definitely boosted his draft stock, even though it boosted him into the 7th. But yeah, I hope he develops well. I think it'd be kind of fun to have Brendan Rice be good. And so hopefully there's definitely the opportunity for him to get the starting role in this team. He just needs to improve on a lot of things, but yeah.
Yeah. I mean, although like I've had my gripes with Quentin Johnson and stuff, he's my second-year breakout this year just because of the opportunity on this team. And I know, like, I've spoken highly of Lam McConkey, but really, there's more opportunity across the board because of the amount of skill positions that I got. So Joshua Palmer, Quentin Johnson, Lam McConkey. I think with Quentin Johnson, there's nowhere to go but up. Like, you have a full offseason to work on your skill set. Like, he's the guy that could end up emerging the most out of these teams. So, like, in Dynasty, if somebody's given up on Quentin Johnston, go trade for him. I think he should be. I wouldn't go crazy on him in redraft, but he's a guy I could easily see break out this year.
Yeah, I mean, like Johnston, he was drafted in the 1st round for a technical reason, and so like the Chargers are invested in him and invested in his development. If he's like a 4th round guy that was thrust into the starting role and sucked like that, it's easier to be like, we're just kind of write him off. But the Chargers are at least going to give him 1, maybe 2 more years to kind of prove himself, figure things out. And he definitely has a ton of opportunity to do that. So I hope he gets better, especially, you got Justin Herbert as quarterback too. So it's not like you're fielding passes from some just bum, And so we talk about like a lot of quarterbacks have a good situation that they're going into.
Are you just going to pretend like Max Duggan is not on the team?
Yeah. But no. But no, yeah, Quentin Johnston, he's kind of fallen into a pretty nice spot where he sits behind Keenan Allen, one of the better receivers in the league for a season. And then he gets to field passes from Justin Herbert, getting coached by, I think, one of the top coaching candidates of the offseason, of the past couple off seasons, really. Yeah, and so, I mean, I agree with you. He's my 2nd-year breakout as well. I mean, I don't know who else I'd really put in that slot, like Max Duggan.
I mean, there is Tuli Tuipulotu. He had a great season from the defensive end, so like that'd be another guy. But he's playing behind Joey Bosa, so it's like, where is he going to be aligned? That there's a lot of questions there.
Yeah, well, maybe move on to the other side, Khalil Mack. Like, it's nice depth that they have, but just can't be an immediate impact guy for now.
Yeah, and then as far as my X factor here, that might be a tough one. That's a really tough one when you're looking at this team. I'm probably gonna say Asante Samuel. The reason I say him is because without J.C. Jackson and with the transitions, they're trying to make a corner. Like he's the lead guy now from the outside cornerback spot. Obviously, you have Derwin James behind him to support, but I'm looking at the rest of the cornerbacks on this roster. He's the most talented out of them. In Fulton. So he's the guy that I think will be the leader of like how the pass defense works. So like he's probably going to be my X factor for the team.
Yeah, for me, my X factor, I'm going to go with Gus Edwards. I think he brings something to this running back room and this offense that this Chargers team really hasn't had for a little while. That just being a consistently strong downhill runner. Like Eckler, he was obviously elite, probably one of the better running backs over the past handful of years, but obviously just like he had his limitations for sure. He excelled at that receiver role, like being a receiving back. And so you got a kind of a different look here. You already know you have a strong offensive line, and so just being able to have a strong ground and pound type offense, I think, is something that he can bring. And so it can kind of just like help alleviate maybe the pressure that Justin Herbert had to deal with over the past couple of seasons of being kind of the focal point of the offense. And kind of now with Gus Edwards, there's a chance that he could be more of like a touch snatcher or whatever. He takes more of the touches on this offense and kind of balances out the team a bit more.
Yeah, obviously, especially with Greg Roman, perfect segue for coaching staffs. Like the way he envisions offense, people associate him with like great running games, and he brought in both backs from Baltimore, J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards. So there's obviously something there to that where they're going to emphasize Gus a lot. But at the same time, I don't think they're going to fully go away from Justin Herbert just because he brought in Greg Roman, because this is probably the best quarterback Greg Roman's had. All due respect to Lamar Jackson, Greg Roman didn't know how to use him right. They did not know how to use him right for the passing game. And still, Lamar won an MVP somehow. So, like, you look at that, and then you look at a guy like Marcus Brady, who I really like personally as an assistant coach. He is there to support Justin Herbert. So I don't think it's all going to be like a 90% running attack here for offense. You still have a guy who's like a top 5 quarterback in a vacuum without focusing on surrounding talent. Better use them. Jim Harbaugh, great team builder in general. Uplifts his players a lot. He's going to help guys like Quentin Johnson, Tui, like all these young guys who have had opportunities, flashes, but not necessarily like found themselves yet. I think Jim is a great guy in general for the whole team. You could already hear stories about how the coach is like night and day compared to Brandon Staley. And then the defensive coordinator I'm really interested in is Jesse Minter, coming over from Michigan. Yeah. A lot of great reviews on him. He could be like the next great mastermind that Mike McDaniel was. I'm excited to see how he uses Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, Derwin James, to like he has Asante Samuel. He has an assortment of weapons to use in the defensive end, and I'm really curious to see, especially when they face the Chiefs. How does he choose to defend Patrick Mahomes? Like, this might be my favorite coaching staff to analyze just because they're so new, but there's like a lot I like from them. So that's why I'm talking in depth about them, because they have all the right ingredients despite coming off a 5-win season.
Yeah. Yeah, and I feel like the 5-win season felt a little bit more fluky than what it really was. I mean, you look at the season prior, even with Brandon Staley, like they were a decently competitive team. Justin Herbert was balling out last season. It just seemed like nothing worked for the team. I think a part of that was
the Chargers are always competitive. The problem with the Chargers is fourth quarter, because they're going to charge it. Like the notorious like name on that is they pretty much were the Atlanta Falcons before the Atlanta Falcons. So like it's like the name association needs a culture change itself. And like I don't think they're losing as many games deep in the fourth quarter with Jim Harbaugh throughout his tenure with the Chargers. I don't think that's gonna happen. It might happen the first year because they're still trying to establish that culture. But overall, I think I think good things are ahead for Chargers fans.
Yeah.
Alrighty.
Yeah,
That wraps up our second to last division, guys. Thank you guys for tuning in. AFC West complete. One more division. We're going out west. Going to talk about more stuff on our channel there. I'm on a mission. Our Instagram handle is amon.a.mission. Our YouTube is amon a mission. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and we'll see you next week to cover our last division of the NFL season. Peace out, guys.
Peace.